once was on mountain, together with the great gathering of the Sangha of monks and the great gathering of the Sangha of Bodhisattvas. At that time, the Blessed One entered the Samadhi that expresses the Dharma called profound illumination. And at the same time, noble Avalokiteshvara, the Bodhisattva Mahasattva, while practicing profound Prajnaparamita, saw in this way. He saw the five skandhas to be empty of nature. Then, through the power of the Buddha, Shariputra said to noble Avalokiteshvara, the Bodhisattva Mahasattva, how should a son or daughter of noble family train who wishes to practice the profound Prajnaparamita? Addressed in this way, noble Avalokiteshvara, the Bodhisattva Mahasattva, said to the noble Shariputra, O son or daughter of noble family who wishes to practice the profound Prajnaparamita should see in this way, seeing the five skandhas the empty of nature. Form is emptiness, emptiness also is form, and emptiness is no other than form, form is no other than emptiness. In the same way, feeling, perception, formation, and consciousness are emptiness. Shariputra, all dharmas are emptiness. There are no characteristics. There is no birth and no cessation. There is no impurity and no purity. There is no decrease and no increase. Therefore, Shariputra, in emptiness there is no form, no feeling, no perception, no formation, no consciousness, no eye, no ear, no nose, no tongue, no body, no mind, no appearance, no sound, no smell, no taste, no touch, no dharmas, no I dhatu, up to no mind dhatu, no dhatu of dharmas, no mind consciousness dhatu, no ignorance, up to no old age and death, no end of old age and death, no suffering, no origin of suffering, no cessation of suffering, no path, no wisdom, no attainment, and no non-attainment. Therefore, Shariputra, since the Bodhisattvas have no attainment, they abide by means of Prajnaparamita. Since there is no obscuration of mind, there is no fear. They transcend falsity and attain complete nirvana. All the Buddhas of the three times by means of Prajnaparamita fully awaken to unsurpassable, true, complete enlightenment. Therefore, the great mantra of Prajnaparamita, mantra of great insight, the unsurpassed mantra, the unequaled mantra, the mantra that calms all suffering should be known as truth since there is no deception. The Prajnaparamita mantra is said in this way. Teata om gate gate paragate parasamgate bodhisattva. Shariputra, the Bodhisattva Mahasattva, should train in the profound Prajnaparamita. Then the Blessed One arose from that samadhi and praised noble Avalokiteshvara, the Bodhisattva Mahasattva, saying, Good, good, O son of noble family, thus it is, O son of noble family, thus it is. One should practice the profound Prajnaparamita just as you have taught, and all the Tathagatas will rejoice. When the Blessed One had said this, Venerable Shariputra and noble Avalokiteshvara, the Bodhisattva Mahasattva, the whole assembly in the world of its gods, humans, asuras, and Gandharvas rejoiced and praised the words of the Blessed One. Bene Jodambane Shedu Chumai Dudo Jendru Babola Mai Bujinzi Nizongandro Zola Jazelo Chandara Samarayam Teata Om Gate Gate Paragate Parasangati Bodhisoha Baba Gonju Sonji Gaiden Bedo Jishil Obodoji Nibadoji Shewadoji Jagi Baji Medum Beju Danji Jedin Goyezo Angerin Jonya Jejo Shewada Mitonu Bejan Jawada Domba Jim Punsun Don Joji Jashi De Jan Den Da De Le Jo. The fundamental ground is scented with incense and strewn with flowers, adorned with Mount Meru, the four continents, the sun and the moon. I imagine this as a Buddha land and offer it. May all sentient beings enjoy this pure realm. Holy Lamas high, wrap the sky of your Dharma bodies in massive clouds of knowledge and love, and let them pour upon the earth of your disciples as we are ready, a shower of rain, the teachings deep and wide.
I send forth this jeweled mandala to you, precious Guru. Idam Guru Radha Mandala Gani Radayami. Jadan Jari Janam La Janjo Badu Dani Jazu Jindagi Junye Jibe Zonam Jidrola Menji Zonye Vajo. Jadan Jari Janam La Janjo Badu Dani Jazu Jindagi Junye Jibe Zonam Jidrola Menji Zonye Vajo. Nanzo Ye Janam La Janjo Badu Dani Jazu Jindagi Junye Jibe Zonam Jidrola Menji Zonye Vajo.
我也这么做，他连着些上班，现在上班上的就都下去，他上的就都下去，我对吧？来的嘛的是吧？上的就都下去，我得了，上的就都下去得了，几点吧？当现在七八度都是上不去，你个那呢？七八度都是上不去，可多的嘛的呗。
So we're currently, again, looking at Lama Tsongkhapa's great treatise on the stage of the path to enlightenment, and specifically in the section on karma. And this section can be broken into three categories. First, reflecting on karma and its effects in general. Then second, reflecting on the particulars of karma and its effects, or the details of karma and its effects. And then how one turns away from non-virtue and engages in virtue after having reflected generally and specifically. So we're in that third category, and the third category has two categories. First, a general presentation, and then how one, in particular, the way of purification through the four powers, or the four opponent forces. So now we're going over number two, which is the way of purification through the four opponent powers. So that's on page, let's just see where Rinpoche starts, but 251 is where that specific section is, the B, or number two.
我的那个时候，可是一直的安个电视咯。
Lobsang.
他这把都是讲不起，年学期嘛过不了，别讲把没把当，你摸摸了手臂，我给你把胸拿，这么样把没一下都没容易，等把突击经济失去比，套餐说送把那了，别过说是，我的那一把他刚才，他逻辑地方俺个地方了说把都是俺啥个没上把，这把一那样的呢。 Nyumu Ogasa Nuguare, Meshibi Ogasa Nuguare, Tamu Ogasa Nuguares, Divatus Jonsona, and Divatus Chimenaba Shaju Mares, Divat Chimenaba Takashabaina, Luigi Deva Nag Deva, Luna is with Divatus Dunajin Nuba Yuare, Nasul Chia Nuba Yuares, what then Dungasu Gabu Mare, Nasul Chena Gabu Mares, what they 시주비 디바타비 타 어느 상지게 마무송자요로 델베 우레스 뭐 담도 된사래.
Okay, so looking at the great treatise on the stage of the path to enlightenment, we find Jayan Sheva's first section, which is after recognizing that non-virtue itself has the potential or the ability to bring about suffering, bring about the lower realms of cyclic existence, then one should want, because he or she wishes to have happiness and not want, and then doesn't want suffering, because of this, there is a need to purify that non-virtue. So it's stated in this particular section that one shouldn't just disregard the fact that he or she is engaged in non-virtue, but practice or apply a method that Lord Buddha taught in order for us to purify that negativity. So this first section reads as follows. And also within Jayan Sheba's section, it states that even though one doesn't want, and it says the same thing in here, but even though one doesn't want to engage in non-virtue through one's body and one's speech, because of ignorance, because of the not knowing, or mesheba, because of not knowing. So here it says carelessness, preponderance of the afflictions, and so forth. So Rinpoche added even though one doesn't want to engage in non-virtue through one's body and speech, because of being under the influence of the afflictions, or being under the influence of a state of misknowing or a state of delusion, we engage in those things anyway, even though we don't want to. So here, it's those things that we engage in that are negative, even though we do not want to, shouldn't be just disregarded. We should apply a method that Lord Buddha has taught for purification. So that's Jamyang Sheba's first section, and it reads as follows. In particular, the way of purification through the four powers. Though you make great effort not to be defiled by wrongdoing, faults may arise due to such things as carelessness and a preponderance of the afflictions. If this happens, it is inappropriate to disregard them without caring, so you must try to apply the remedy about which the compassionate teacher spoke. The Lord Buddha spoke of many methods for us to be able to purify, and therefore we should apply them because of what the negative actions will bring about in the future. So the next section makes a differentiation between a downfall or an infraction and how that's purified, and a non-virtue or a misdeed. So here it says, now in regard to how to remedy any infractions, do as it is explained in the context of the three vows. So infractions, or another way to translate it, downfalls, apply to the three types of vows. So if one breaks any among the vows which are in those three different categories, then it is called a downfall. So a broken vow is called a downfall, or here an infraction. So the way that one purifies an infraction or a downfall is according to the specific ceremony within the context of that vow. So these three vows are the individual liberation vows, the bodhisattva vows, and the tantric vows. So there's what's called a sojong, or a ceremony to repair, and it's called sojong again. And we have an individual liberation vow, sojung. There is a bodhisattva vow, sojung. And then there is a tantric vow, sojung. So each of the different types of vow has their own individual sojung, or repair ceremony.
다 네바 디바시 주비추 디바스나 가서 먹어서 로도 대바 가시라는 남의 동에 지지리스네 바도 먹이 있으니
Leso.
어디 디바시 주비서 디바도 어디 말보다 디바시 주비추도 어디 도지샤데스 네부터 상고는 샤고를 도지샤데 취지되면 샴바 샤주선바 선바좀 취지던 데나 디바시신 사바 세제 나반주로 소바데 디바시 주비추 두두진 공부해봐래 두두진에 어디 있어래
So then this next section, according to the outline, again in parentheses, this is Jayan Sheva's outline. This next section says, now in regard, however you should remember, one more time. However, you should remedy sins through the four powers. So this is speaking of the four opponent powers. And here, sins, this word sin is what they're using for what we usually translate as a misdeed, or another word which means the same thing is non-virtue. So non-virtue then is defined as that which is presented in Scripture and within the type that brings about suffering. So that's the definition of a non-virtue. And here we find again, as I stated before, a differentiation between a misdeed and a downfall. So here we're speaking of misdeeds, and the text states to apply the four opponent powers. So it says, however, you should remember remedy sins or misdeeds through the four powers. The sutra giving the four teachings says, Maitreya, if bodhisattvas, the great heroes, possess these four teachings, then they will overcome any sins that they committed and accumulated. So, according to the commentary, this section, which is applying the four opponent powers to misdeeds, is broken up into two categories. First, the abbreviated explanation of the four opponent powers that are to be applied, and then the expansive explanation. So, what I've read up to so far falls under the abbreviation of the explanation of the four abbreviated explanation of the four opponent powers.
Hoje taji nebu toje jeba sheba de jikanshi nas nebu toje de kares jikanshi na ot jeba sheba yimbare jikanshi na de namba sonji ba kundu shebe tose tat kante debal jeba de yiba ta deba kaso loji deba ngag deba karsa ba ina otandi ma sonya be jeba de le namba sonji ba kundu shebe taje
Lasa.
Tad to son des Sheshin sabilen yungen yinbe teseju nuna mangeba tajemus o tege jobat tende yimba joba ore jobat je ro tajemus o teba do ore nga no de nga je gange na ba sonje ba kundu shebe ta tambuje ne bu kundu shebe ta ne ba je ne ba la du ta somba je tenje to jiba marbe wa de ne bu to je teres she son de jeba sheba din bare
Lasa.
de ne bu to je samba ina she shin sabe le diba kazi chebe ina ya ne bu to je samba ina 어디 마다비 대바제요 말스 셰시 사비 레 뇽에도 레도 근갈로 냐부터 상고는 샤다제나 다 두그레스 망아벨레 다발 기차가요 말스 보다 디바 가는 예나야 냐부터 상고는 샤다제바이나 강가 다 두그레스 송고사레
So then now we begin the second section, which is the expanded explanation of the four. So it says, what are the four? They are the power of eradication, which refers to regretting a non-virtue that one has committed through one's body or speech, or acted on, committed is the best word, through one's body or speech. And then it says the power of applying remedies, which is number 2. 3, the power of turning away from faults. And 4, the power of the foundation. Here it states that we can overcome any non-virtues or misdeeds that have been committed and accumulated. So if we, through these 4 opponent powers, can purify misdeeds that are done and accumulated, therefore certain to experience, then what need is there to talk about the ability to purify those lesser negativities such that are one has done but not accumulated and are uncertain relative to the experience. Dixon.
What that they are that Geshe Lharampa Toma Mebane Megi Lela Jobasheba Moi des Tejawala Name Jinjabusun Jitu Gongosos Lado Lambite Labitene Sue Tambi Shabatan Sanji Sungi Gone Shabani Shawos what the Caswan Tan Naba Sanji with the Nyabala Jobajiatrot. The Toma Meban Mago Shibal and Jobamo. And then at Diba Sabat, Joe Toma Meban Tatiba to Lunga used to go to Diba Mobasa Savares, what in Jobajiatres, Jobamo Hide, Jobat Jose Momosan Town about Jobachimares, Tejawala, Name Suji, Jebo, Chetu Su Gongosa, Deba Magoatele, and David Dungajinu Neba Yohare, Nasul Jea Neba Yohare, and the Nasul Jea Gabio Mare, Dungel Gabio Mare, or to San Momotambaina, Jose Momosan Tambaina, and Debal Jobat Yungres, when he said it. Tala Dolambice, Sue Tambi Shabatan, Sue Tambas Tendu Nole, Sue Potuciore, Tenale, Shabba is Sonjero, Tetan, Sanji Sungun Shabata, 35 Buddha Marbe, what is the need Shawures, what the Sunday said.
The Chapagare, the Tongshag ire, then Denji Do, Nika ire. The Denji Do, the Nepo Gund should be Do, then the Dru ire, then Dola Dene. Then the Napa Sun Jimbi, the Tongsha ire, then Chapagare, then Gadu J.
What that Debal and Jobal has a duty, Debal Joba, you Debal Gabio Maro, the Nebu Gungus or Nebu de Sur Tamban Shabatan, 35 of the Paris, the Sombaro, Ulma Jebel Egurota.
Ah, the Gangan Center, the Nika, the Nampa Sun, Jimmy Gundi should be dope, the Ure, then a Danji Do, the Dola Dene. Then Gadu Gutso. What the
Debal and Joba Jewures, Debal Joba Jene, and Debal Niabute, Sur Tabi Shabatan, 35 Buddha, Longures, Dudiches Sombaro, Ulma Jebel.
I was just, what I was asking Rinpoche is we find in the Power of Eradication section the 35 Buddhas and so forth. And then we have in the Power of Applying Remedies section the dependence upon sutras. So I was asking him, when do you do this recitation? Is it just linked to the next opponent power, or is it a specific threat section? So Rinpoche, I'll explain it then within the context of where we're going. So I just wanted to explain what I just asked. So you will definitely experience the result of karma that you have done and accumulated, since the four powers can destroy this kind of karma before it takes effect. It goes without saying that the four powers can destroy karma whose result is indefinite. The four powers are as follows. So first we begin with the power of eradication, which is regret for non-virtue one has done. So it says the first power is great contrition for having done non-virtuous actions since beginningless time. In order to feel this, it is necessary to meditate on the way in which you produce the three effects of actions, fruitional and so forth. At the time of putting this into practice, do so by way of the two methods, the confession of sins and the sutra of the heart, the sutra of the golden light, and the confession of sins by way of the 35 Buddhas. So here, this is one looks at the non-virtues that he or she is engaging in, and then also those non-virtues that one has done since beginningless time. And then generates a regret for having committed these non-virtues. And without thinking about the reason that one should have regret, then regret won't come. So one won't have a regret for the action that one has engaged in. So here it's necessary to apply reasons, such as non-virtuous actions have the ability to give rise to suffering, have ability to give rise to the lower realms of cyclic existence. And these are things that are unwanted. So since they have this power or this ability, and then we look at the various results of non-virtues, fruitional, causally concordant, and environmental, and we wish to put a stop to those non-virtues, abilities, or power. So this is how we generate regret, is first analyzing why we should have this regret, and then once we recognize that we should, then we apply various practices of confession, and then that serve as remedies to our non-virtue. So in this, once we generate regret, then this inspires us to apply various practices which that within the practice acknowledge our downfalls, and then serve as a dependent, an actual remedy. So that was the answer to the question, that it serves as this confession or acknowledgement of downfalls that one then regrets, and then serves as a remedy within this next section. Digson Rinpoche, Tuchena. That's so.
So
number one, the power of eradication is finished. And now we move on to the power of applying remedies. And this is a very important section. And then there are 6 specific remedies.
Shishin la subi dui chi lemba dan zemba dan loba su sos do de samala temba se de shishin danga so bom nye che jedon shera nye bo so marbe bom nye che jedon shera nye bo ha su de mara o de su ngalo ne chi lol zeya tönda san ta ya ana loya o de su ngalo do de samal temba se do teres do de samal temba ta ga zo de sanskrit de pali ne pegi tul je jabate podu jayoro podu ja an so beba so go de chang lo jaba mambo yo sa de lo de chasang lo gres ane o de podu ja de ane o de jaba ni don son don lo ba yin de ne chu son je non chan gres what the do the samala temba so ndo karno deba tanu warta teri pai boda na ta de so daba na ta deba tanu gre shishin ndo en shera ne na deba tanu gre shishin ndo karno deba ta go jirwa what the son de sare.
So the first remedy among the 6 is dependence on the profound sutras, includes activities as receiving the oral transmission of sutras such as the Prajnaparamita, retaining their meaning and reading them. If we memorize any of the sutras, so here when it states the Prajnaparamita, this is speaking of the 100,000 verse Perfection of Wisdom Sutra, the 20,000 verse, the 8,000 verse, and then the Heart Sutra. So when it says the Prajnaparamita, that's what it's referring to, which falls within the sutra teachings. So when we're, again, thinking about the meaning, reading them, memorizing them, then we're doing this particular remedy. We're engaging in this remedy, dependence upon profound sutras. So, in the Tibetan tradition, there were 100 of the Buddha's pronouncements, the Kangjur, books translated from Pali and Sanskrit into Tibetan. There are ceremonies where many monks get together. Ganden Sera Dang. This one Drepon Kono. Oh, okay, okay. So then there are ceremonies in the Tibetan tradition where many monks Anidang Drapa. Okay, so both. Okay, so then there will be ceremonies that we Tibetans do where 2,000 or 3,000 monks and nuns will get together. The Nyamdu, Gongel Mepichi, ne Sopola, Anidang Drapa.
Or the Shugil Chatang Paletang, or the Chuji Luju, then Yemi Shilatan, or the Lujun Sanders.
You need Drapadang Ani Nyamdu. Yomar.
The Anyandu Luba, you are there, and the Kagamocha, Tabata Lugre, and the Lugre.
So I was just trying to get clear on how the details of these ceremonies work. So Rinpoche said that at times there are mixed ceremonies where monks and nuns are together, or even householders are involved in helping in the ceremony. But usually, I'm going to explain the ceremony. This particular ceremony is done with, the specific groups of monks together and specific groups of nuns together. So sometimes all of the monks in a monastery would get together, and there would be 2,000 to 3,000 monks in attendance, and we were able to, within 3 hours, read the entire Kangjur out loud. So everyone would get together and read, and each person would read a certain numbers of pages and keep getting handed pages, and then reciting them. And with this many monks together, we're able to do that in 3 hours or so. We would get by the time we had our 1 tea and bread, and then got to our next meal, then the actual ceremony would be finished. So this is a tradition within the Nyingma Kagyu Sakya Galut. But Rinpoche's frame of reference is at Drepung, where this went on. So I was just asking him if this went on with householders and nuns, and he said sometimes mixed, but usually everyone in their own individual monasteries would do it, or the groupings of the similar monasteries, male monasteries. Thank you, Chen. But those monks who are from Drepung, Ganden, and Sera truly engage in philosophical inquiry. Sometimes it's just translated as debate, Tseni is, but really it's really philosophical inquiry or philosophy. So because those monks really do engage in this way of studying it, they know the meaning also of what they're reciting. So within our prayer book, we have very beneficial or very, I don't remember from she said good or beneficial. I apologize. I don't want to break it up more than I am right now. Within our book, we have the Heart Sutra. We have the 35 Buddhas of Confession. We have the 7-limb prayer. And all of these are pronouncements of Lord Buddha. Would fall into this dependence on sutra. Important.
Chunyi jujin demane taba icheba wos demane taba icheba da mejin USA chunyi las da mejin USA chunyi sana USA de la yuji USA da yuji USA ni jagondo yuji USA da yuji USA sana toni yuji USA de yuji USA sana sheba chama kan la jagondo USA da mejin USA chunyi USA de yuji USA la yuji USA da yuji USA ni le tanda de yuji USA toni lo de toni de yuji USA yin song ya de
yuji USA Uchen the sheba
yuji da shi de ta sheba kan la USA ja de ro da.
So the next section is interest in emptiness. This means to comprehend the reality in which there is no self, and which is luminously clear, and to have conviction that the mind is primordially pure. So here, when we look at the clear light itself, clear light can be divided into two categories. Clear light that is emptiness itself, and then clear light that is consciousness, the very, very subtle, extremely subtle consciousness. So in this is speaking of the clear light that is emptiness, when it states that the uzer kabi the puik dagu detsko
toni la mebane da mejin USA chuni la juji demane taba iche bawus
so the dameshing
USA
okay
USA chuni la USA 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 ni gnane te USA toni
the bouquet gar don the gar
USA zu mig zu tongro zu du yuro mig sheba du yujero yujin shiken du yujere shesa yulagro yu zoni mi shi zu tongre zu du mi shi yure zoni mi shi yujen marba tanda sheba ngara gro da.
So this word luminously clear, there is luminous clear light, and then this subtle conscious clear light. So I was at this word which is connected to clear light is here, and it's translated as luminously. So this is speaking of, specifically when we're talking about clear light, we're speaking of emptiness. So the self which is luminously clear, which is empty.
Oje ta kanda toni gonsa toni lugwa chagu no ta ngaso na ngasa gente na dema marubares tendi yimbeje homonga la tuni trube yimbeje nuanga la tuni trube yimbe tendi insa ne ngao nya be to be tabala ma to rawa de mares rawa de me tendi yimbeje wote sandane toni lugwa cha sona wote Toni Guacha Sona Wate Toni Shesuna Tene Toni to Bulu de Denzil Marva Taba Dream I Shesuna Taba Drenzi London not Deba Maduba Shesuna not Deba Madua Shevulu Tege Denzil Marva Denzil no Denzil and Devo the child no the control no Tomul no Tea Devo Jaganashi Dongela Soba. What the someone know, Tony, what the cage mar, what Tony, what the son there.
Let's up. nga demo drupa denda yin bichir the joang nga dan the yanjer surlang
Tapana ngaso ngase ngase san tawa ina ote deba maru takanda jutu signal deba maru waro nga deba maru waro nga deba maru wa intendi imbi tendi kande resna pomunga la tuine tubare daji ne pomunga la tuine tubare joanga la tuine tubare jujin la tuine tubare tuba insa ne matu barwa diyo mares tobi tabalo matu barwa diyo wote santa de jir wote te santa suna tobi tabala matuba rawa de meba de shebe lotege tobi tabala la matuba rawa de yoba de zebe lot de no rota taba dre mai mi shebe lotege taba dre ji lo no otenda marbe
that's it. So what does emptiness mean? What does it mean when one has the mind realizing emptiness? Emptiness, when we look at it as a subject, is as follows. The I itself is empty because it is not truly established. The I is not truly established because it dependently originates. What is its dependent origination? When we look at the dependent origination, we find that there is a collection of things or parts that come together that then are designated as this or that. So in the case of the I, we have a collection which is such as the 5 elements, the 5 aggregates that then come together and are designated as the I. But there is no inherently existent, intrinsically established I that can be found when one investigates this I that is normally grasped at as being truly established. So normally we have a mind that grasps at this I as being independent, as being inherently existent, does not see it as not truly established. Or does not see it as established as a designation that's imputed or placed upon a collection. So the mind that grasps at things as being truly established can only be harmed or contradicted by the mind that recognizes that things are not truly established. Just like the mind that grasps as a rope being a snake in a dark room can only be contradicted or harmed by the mind that recognizes that the rope is not a snake and is a rope itself. Therefore, when one starts to recognize that things are not independent, that the I comes into existence through dependent origination, and then a designation of I on this basis, then once one begins to realize this harms the grasping at true establishment. And if the grasping at true establishment is harmed, then what the grasping at true establishment causes is also harmed and negated, such as anger and attachment and delusion. This is what is meant by emptiness. It means that things are empty. Things are not truly established because of dependent origination. And the mind that grasps at things as being truly established causes birth, aging, sickness, death, and so forth. And it can only be harmed by the mind that realizes emptiness, that realizes the lack of true establishment of these things, that realizes the lack of intrinsic existence of these things. And here the example is the I itself, the I not having existence, the I merely being a designation on a collection.
Ta nenzi de denje yala junyi na kui tsawa de marbe nenzi de kui tsawa indu ji de ga de o de tsama denje yala junyi ka denzi ke de marbe de ba maru she so na wo de denje yala junyi doju de ne doju tsama ge de ne jure ne marbe.
So when we look at the 12 links of dependent origination and how that exactly works, we'll see that at the root of those 12 links is the grasping at true establishment. So in dependence upon this grasping at true establishment, then all of the other links are created. So we first have this grasping at true establishment, or this ignorance, and then we have compositional activity and consciousness and name and form and so forth. So it all comes about by the grasping at true establishment. Rinpoche, chutsu jipa les.
Oh, never
So we'll take a short break.
Oh, yeah, that's somba marbe.
Okay, so
Somba debala tembarendo.
we're on number 3, the power of recitation.
Somba debala tembane, yegi javala su, zon cheba jena, chuga jin to deba os, chuga jin deba os, ote, yegi javala su, zon cheba jena, chuga jin deba tele, debala tembas marbe. Debala temba, ta nga so ote, te ta umane maamane so, deba ina, ane jawa shaja tuba gung, shaja tubi tuka le, dayu jingu ta nyemi jingu ta nasanta, ane ngati ko ne, te ta umane maamane so, hati jamba ina, ote deba le temba tere mde. Te naji Chenrezig gung, Chenrezig tuka le, hati ko ne, umane beme os ngata ya. Ote na ye dang ta kanga jiba marbe. Ote deba le temba so tere ndwa. Ane jaso ke, Amitabha se nyo dendo, otu shida kechi marbe. Amitabha tukal nghatin ko, na Amitabha nghat jamba ina, debal tempa de dendo de. Otu ngachiba marbe.
Yoba me. Okay.
Jakuza Amitabha se nyo dendo.
Oh, okay.
Otu
Tuche.
thai tukal nghatin ko ne,
Leso.
na Amitabha kumba ina, debal tempa de dendo.
Leso. So number 3, dependence on recitation means to recite according to the rituals the special formula such as the 100-syllable mantra of Vajrasattva. The long NGK logo. Okay, so the tantra requested by Sabahu, the flames from fires that spread in spring forests are out of control, burning up all the thickets. Likewise, the winds of ethical discipline fan the fires of recitation, and the flames of great perseverance burn up sins. Just as when the sun's rays destabilize snow, it melts in the unbearable brilliance, so too do the snows of sins disappear. When destabilized by the sunbeams of recitation and ethical discipline, lighting a butter lamp in a dark gloom entirely clears away the darkness. Likewise, the darkness of sins accumulated for 1,000 lifetimes is quickly dispelled by the butter lamp of recitation. So here, recitation is referring to when one recites mantras while simultaneously doing the ritual associated with that particular deity. So here we have the example of Vajrasattva mantra, the 100-syllable mantra. So if one, while doing the recitation of the mantras, does the visualization of Vajrasattva having at the mind area, which is here, a mantra garland, that is circumambulating a syllable supported by a lotus moon disc. So if you are, while one is reciting the mantras, there is the visualization that goes with the specific deity. So again, the mantra garland that one visualizes of the actual mantra of the deity one is doing the practice of. Then it falls under the classification of dependence upon recitation. So if one is reciting Shakyamuni's mantra, Teata Om Muni Muni Maha Muni Ye Soha, if one, while reciting that mantra, and visualizes this mantra garland, then this falls under the dependence upon recitation. The same would go for Chenrezig, Omani Peme Hom. When one does this recitation while visualizing Chenrezig with this mantra garland at his heart, then this becomes dependent upon recitation. So in the Chinese tradition, we find a great reliance on Amitabha and the recitation of the name mantra of Amitabha. So if while reciting this mantra of Amitabha, there is also a visualization of Amitabha with the mantra garland at the mind area, at the heart area, then one is doing dependence upon recitation. So any deity that one chooses, if one recites the mantra while doing the ritual that goes along with the mantra, then the front and self-generation rituals, then it becomes dependence upon recitation, as long as there is the practice itself included in the recitation of the mantra, not just the words of the mantra. Diso.
and han debi me and debi snowmountain umasho yongres and ngazo senshang to snowmountain masho umarba example then najin and then han debi me made when debi snowmountain to masho yongres deba to kalegal tan then najin and han debi Battlelands over Battleland light, what the Mabagal Nundres, and Mabagal Nundres, what the person Jane, what the Shigud water, what the Water.
So we have this quote from the Tantra requested by Sabahu. And first there is a comparison being made here to this mantric recitation, being able to burn away our non-virtues in the same way that fire burns wood or burns away wood. So the flames from fires that spread in spring forests are out of control, burning up all the thickets. Likewise, the winds of ethical discipline fan the fires of recitation, and the flames of great perseverance burn up sins. So here, by engaging in, so this great perseverance, engaging in this recitation, is able to get rid of our non-virtuous deeds. So here again, our recitation is compared to fire. Fire burning again away wood, and in this case the fire of our recitation burns away our non-virtue. And then it says, just as when the sun's rays destabilize snow, it melts in the unbearable brilliance, so too do the snows of sin disappear when destabilized by the sunbeams of recitation and ethical discipline. Here our recitation of mantras being like the sun, in that the sun burns away, slowly destabilizes, and eventually gets rid of the snow when it shines on it. And likewise, this recitation is able to melt away our non-virtues, so purify our non-virtues. And then lighting a butter lamp in a dark gloom entirely clears away the darkness. Likewise, the darkness of the sins accumulated for 1,000 lifetimes is quickly dispelled by the butter lamp of recitation. So here, dark gloom is compared, our non-virtues or our misdeeds are compared to dark gloom. And just like the dark gloom goes away when it is illuminated, so too does the dark gloom of our non-virtue when we illuminate it with our power of the mantric recitation.
Deju mala chutin long bar chundu chembi meje dibasi 제대 간라 님이 왜지 동나 안에 지지 무슨 좋아지 수지 님이 왜지 내주지 동나 디비 가장 세반조로스 어디보자는 어디 송도도 왔다더니 디비 가서나 다 베비게 더네 얘기 해가 기차를 해가 디비 가서나 디바 먹어줘 디비 가서 디바 먹어줘 디비 가이 버치셔 디비 가이 배 잡아 맞어 디비 가서나 어디 디바 먹어줘 들 맞으면 거야 말아 디비 신슬어서나 디바 먹어줘 들 디바 먹어줘 디비 신마이 네 디바 먹어줘 디비 매바마이 네 베비 가서 그래 해가 버진 조진 네 라지기 제스 어디 얘기 hin지보하게 어디 제 그셔 제 조진 조진 디비 간서와 나오데 디바 먹어줘 드레스 디비 간서나 디바 먹어줘 디비 간라이 가리 임버치시 디비 가리 잡아 맞죠 어디서 내고도데
yeah. So when we would look at this, we would say, when we look at these different examples of the this being compared to fire, and this being compared to the brilliance of the sun, and then the dark gloom. So here we would ask: is our non-virtue wood? So it says, burn up great sin. So is our non-virtue wood? No, this is just an example to help us understand what this non-virtue is. So you have to see it in the Tibetan and how the words are connected. They're in the English unconnected, so it seems much more clear, but it's more like the wood of non-virtue, the wood of non-virtue, the snow, the sins of snow, or the snows of sin. Do the snows of sin disappear? The darkness of sins, the dark gloom of sins. So here in the Tibetan, you can then debate those words. Is there dark gloom sin? Is there the sin is that an actual kind of darkness? So here, no. This is by giving an example by way of giving the meaning by way of using an example and comparing it to something else. So there are different. Then this zochen gari sumpre the kanga lasum the cheran the ranjing chen dang
the yen son da nyangas bebage son da nyangas ne yegi nyamu zuyage nyanga lo nyanga ne jen son yo bi jen example
yes
zojen ranjing jen oto yegi nyi
zochen gare
zojen sana wade debi tree debi sona matis na wade zojen de zojen
okay
debi tree debi drug what is la na zuz ko zuz debi tree is la na dibal madu ko ayo maro debi matis na ne dibal madu ko ayo maro kenga ko ni jibu zuru
lasso. So this is written in a poetic way. So Rinpoche is saying that this is it's not a metaphor, is it? I'm really bad with English grammar, so I'm trying to. Is it a simile or a metaphor? So using the snow, the sins of snow, the snow of sins. It's a metaphor. So when we look at ways of writing, there's ways of writing by using example, natural and then metaphorical. So Rinpoche had said these are the three ways that one would write a poem, and clarify by example, by natural, and then this would be by metaphor. Chen.
that person jagan doa person doa de ten de bala de bakatul person son doa person de ne nebugun to gal jagum de toni la mabas toni gomba ina ane db tril no ngre ane db sono model no ngre db dar no ngre ane jara kan rab marbe shishi no ba ina ya what the person got some what the kan to gal jaje
Shishin do Parshin. Okay. Lessa. So we can use these three examples. We can use these three examples and then relate them also to the other types of remedies. So the other 5 types of remedies. So we went over dependence upon profound sutras and dependence upon emptiness. So we could say also that dependence upon the emptiness can clear away the non-virtue. Our non-virtue is wood, and our snow of sins, and the darkness of our sins. So we wouldn't just say it only relates to this dependence upon recitation, this mantric recitation and practice. All of these remedies have the power to get rid of our misdeeds and could be inserted into this poem as well. Also the perfection of wisdom, recitation of the perfection of wisdom also burns away the tree of our non-virtue and melts the snow of our sins and clears away the dark gloom of our non-virtue. So we can apply these other remedies as well to that poem.
Well, bonzang jibi ndo tele debala temba khatu to the person son doa. The never going to jibi to trogal jawu.
So these 3 examples in this case relate to the dependence upon recitation, but these 3 examples also relate to all of the other opponents or remedies that are presented here. So when we look, this is the very important section on this dependence upon recitation, and we can apply this points that are made here to the others as well.
What did Karsa? Did you Hagun Hai to Galhatin Quene? Did you Shebaina? Dibakangal, Dibi Karl Nunder, Dibi Shin Nunder, and then Dibi Dar Nunder, Sanjik Songo, Yabu Marba, and then also Han to Dar Lela Marba. Tangasu example, and then also Canon Nalula, Theatre Omen Mahamaneso, Oma, Awon Bezango, Pemasindo, Levepemi, Tokal and Hatin, and then Hatos Jambaina, Deval Demba. Then Najin Hakachiba Marba. Was Jamba in Devala Demba. Lai Tokal Dajin Magun and Hard Jabaina, Sella Demba, Ul Legro, Sella Demba, Sell Demba, Deval Demba, or the Rendo.
So we can see how important our prayer book is. We have all of these different mantras in there. And if we're doing any among those mantras while we're engaging in the visualization of the front and self-generation and the heart-centered lotus and moon disc, where we have a syllable being circumambulated by a mantra garland, if we're doing any of these mantras found in the book while doing that practice, then we have dependence upon recitation, and we see the power of it, and that can get rid of our non-virtues. So in the prayer book we have Shakyamuni's mantra, Teata Om Muni Muni Maha Muni Ye Soha, and Chenrezig's mantra, Om Mani Padme Hum, and Guru Padmasambhava's mantra, Om Ahom Vajra Guru Pema Siddhi Hum, and we have the Jenda Gari La Sun. So then also we find this mantra garland in all of these, all the deities' practices, such as the higher practices of highest practices of Chakrasambhava and Yamantaka and so forth. Kala Chakra. So we find that this can be brought to all of the different ones. It's literally what all of the. So this can be brought to all of the different ones. Parentheses, different tantric deities. This is very important. So as you go through this more and more and start to understand it, you'll see the real importance of this particular power, the dependence upon recitation. I'm sorry, the Nyepo Gundashupidope, the power of applying remedies.
Yeah.
Sorry about that.
Tamena mala mamushubayi, mena malusewa shebayin, tsro tonne sabi dibi me, deju mameni to sewashi, she son sos, tsro ton sabi, tsro ton, tsro ton sabi, lunga yesu dibi me bate, deju mamete wate, tanagr sonrota, debajevina, debatu tanagr sonrota. What the Sanji sont les Chijiurota.
The Lamrim Chenmo Kabiyare.
Lamrim Chenmo Tata would the Tazere, Chutaji Lutaswan.
The Losash.
Mamma Dra Katudre, Mamma Dra.
Okay.
Mena Mala, Mamma Shubai Tamadlur and Tama. Mena Malusewa Shebaji, Badalent was Kabaina Mena Sanagro, Seroton Sabi Dibi Me, Deju Mamini to Sevajis,
Lesser.
Seroton Sabi Dibi Mabade, and then Deju Mamate entered out Kalitano.
So here in this last one, we have this lighting a butter lamp in a dark gloom. Entirely clears away the darkness. Likewise, the darkness of non-virtue accumulated for 1,000 lifetimes is quickly dispelled by the butter lamp of recitation. So here it's speaking of the recitation, and then as we said, all of the others being able to get rid of the darkness of our non-virtue, which is our non-virtue.
Deba Shangi, Sama Maton Jindo, Deju Shavos, that Deba Tabi Tate, Mayuba to what they and then Ha Jang was, Deju Shavos, or whatever, Deba Shangi Ta, Deba Tabita, Deba Tabita, Hotel Mendoza Sondua, and Deju Shavo, Samane, Malana saying about you what, Nilan saying about you, Nilandana, Deba Tabita jeans or what, Nilan. Nilantan Juba Nilantana, Dibatabitaris, Tene Shutua Nilantana Dibatabitari, Omantua Nilantana Dibatabitaris, Omantuansu, Omansu Tua dance, what the Sudan Mambuta, Chatua Nilantana Gareta. Uma Tuanjana Devatabata is Chatuanjana Devatabata is Chatan Agota, Uinjita, or the Zio, which is Dabuda.
Umayubeche.
Yeah.
Okay, so now we get to the section that shows us the signs so that we know there's been some sort of a purification that's taken place. So further, repeat the recitations until you see the signs that you have cleared away your sins. The formula of exhortation states that the signs are dreaming the following. Vomiting bad food, consuming such foods as yogurt and milk, vomiting, seeing the sun and the moon, moving through the air, blazing fires, subduing water buffalo and persons in dark clothing, seeing the community of monks or nuns, seeing a tree that gives out a milky substance, riding upon an elephant or bull, climbing upon a lion throne, climbing up a mansion or a mountain and listening to the teaching. So Rinpoche said, I wonder if drinking tea in your dream is a good sign, because there's milk in it.
So
these are some signs in your dreams that will tell you there's been a purification. So then we see in here things such as the sun and the moon. So this means the sun shining, the moon rays, and so forth. So seeing the sun shining, seeing the moon and its rays. Moving through the air means flying. Rinpoche said he only one time before had a dream that he flew. Seeing blazing fires.
Yeah.
Seldu.
Then
Okay, so the Datayan.
Yeah.
Ken Sabudu.
Jane Toba Nyalan Divatavataris, and the Nyalan the Gloomy, Gnu Tuans, Nyalan the Gloomy, Gnu Tuan Yalan Divatavata in Zarwa, and no Omanju in Shintans, Omanju in Shintan, and the Lambuchetan, Chuchu Redan, Singi Till Deba, Kanzang Did Zeba. What the Kamba to Ganzibalas of Yana Tansuna, Debata in Zaro, then Chunia Banyalan Tansuna, Debata in the Imba, Kuji, Tunlis,
Lesser.
High is it? What the National Yelama, but on Sansan, what the Debata in word.
Lesser. So we have these, seeing the community, seeing actual monks and nuns, seeing the milky substance coming from a tree, riding bulls and elephants, when one climbs on a throne, or even going up a mountain or hearing teachings. Or there are so many different kinds of signs that we can have that will tell us that we've had a purification that takes place, as well as just a generally good feeling. Decent.
So this Kuzula Temba. Do this Amula Temba. Tunila Memba, Debala Temba Sumba, Tajeba Jeba Kuzula Temba Rendua. Jeba Kuzula Temba ne, Sanjela Teba Jene, Kuzu Sheba Wosa, Sanjil Teba Jene, and the Sanjik Sidachut in the Zuvatele, Kuzula Tembas.
Lesser. So, number 4 is dependence upon images. So, means to make images of the Buddha once you have acquired faith in him. So this is images such as statues, paintings, and so forth, and giving them So we see Ted's an enormous good deed that he did in giving this Buddha Shakyamuni statue to the center.
What the Nazi Chenrezig, Chenrezig said Juzuba in a Shetan Zuba in a Debatano Rota, the Nazi Dramal Tene, Drami Kuzuya, Shetan Zuya, Judiji Dandan, and the material Tene, material said Juzuya, what the Debatano was or what? Chiba Marbe?
Rinpoche, the Zuya, the Zu,
Hazo.
Yine Jim Chipa? The Ngatsu the Chenrezig go, Chenrezig Chutsu care than Chupa go. The Gola Dan.
Kula Demarota,
The Kanga.
Chenrezig, Chenrezig, Kuzubarota.
Lesser. So.
Actually, understood it.
Lesser. So it also, so we use the example of the Buddha Shakyamuni statue. But any statues that were given to the center or made for the center or made, so Rinpoche used those examples, would fall under this category. So we have the Chenrezig statue, for instance, that the Jayan Choling nunnery gave to us. And then we have all of these different tankas. And then we have Machaea and so forth. So the tanka of Machaea and so forth. So all of these would fall under dependence upon images. And here, the word zua, which it usually means, here it's translated as to make, which is the correct translation, also could mean almost in the sense of making it at the appear at the center. So I don't want to, it's slang, making it happen, but this word make can also mean this in this context, not just the actual physical building of the tanka. It can also be presenting it as an offering as well. So now we're on 5, dependence on worship.
Sanjay Ti Chuden La Choba Naba Tansu Sheba was what the Chobal Tempadredwa, Sanjay Ti Chuden's example. Sanjay Ti Chuden and the Chenrezig Ti Chuden and the Kangal Shaya Gruta, Maria Ti Chuden, what the Choba Naba Tansu Sheba, and the Nazu Chupuya, Mutupuya, what the Choba Karpuya Ina. What the Tibetan Buddhism, also what the Kalbuya, you know, Chubakari, some Tibetan word.
Dependence on worship means to make a variety of offerings to an image of the Buddha or to a stupa. So this is just making offerings. Here, Buddha and stupa are used as an example of objects to which we make offerings to. But we could also say Chenrezig. So here Buddha is, when it's capitalized here, meaning usually Shakyamuni. So we also, the same would mean, is true for Chenrezig or Maitreya. So offering flowers and water bowls and various other items to these beings, making butter lamp offerings or offering lights. So to the Chenrezig and the stupa, Maitreya and his stupa, and so forth. It's or his.
That Chobal never done as to Chubambu Anangazu Kalasa di Chuban Bugare, Chaton di Chuban Bugare, or to Sukungago, the Chobal never enduro.
So we can also do this when we're eating food and we make an offering, or we're drinking tea and we make an offering of that. So this falls into category 5 as well. These types of things fall into category 5 as well.
That's also what the Janet and Kalasa Karin Uma. Then Tambalan Saji Chubam is a large and the Chuba in the Marbe.
So Also, when we sit down to eat, and we have food, or even if we just have some tea, and then when we make that prayer to the Buddha, to the precious Buddha, I offer this. To the precious Dharma, I offer this. To the precious Sangha, I offer this. So I make this offering to these holy beings, to the Buddha, the Dharma, and the Sangha. So the prayer is in Tibetan. So you would say, I make an offering to the Buddha, the Dharma, and the Sangha of whatever it is. And first, before making that offering, you state the syllables Om Ah Hum 3 times, and then it transforms it into an object that can be offered, a pure object that can be offered. So the 3 times Om Ah Hum. And then you make an offering of that by stating, I offer this to the Buddha, I offer this to the Dharma, I offer this to the Sangha.
That Drupa Chen La Tenpa Ne, Sanji Tang, Geshe Chenmo Naji, Chen Tuishin Zungwa Wu Sa. Chen Tuishin, Sanji Tang, Geshe Chenmo Zina Shangchu Senpa Tsuyin Jiro Da. Geshe Chenmo Naji, Chen Zungshin, Chen Tuishin Zungwa Wu Sa. What the Chen La Tenpa So what the rest of Chen Tuishin Zungwa. The Da Ne La Du Su Ngun Su, Zungwa Zang De. What the never going to be taught to the Shantin de Waggle, how do so most songs about the rest?
Lesser.
And the Tegma de Jen Mombuyor,
Lesser. So the last is dependence upon names. It means to hear the recitation of and retain the names of Buddhas and the great conqueror's children. So here, reciting just the names or the name mantras, if you will, of Buddhas and Bodhisattvas would allow us to purify, or would allow us to purify our negativities by way of applying a remedy. So that's number 6. And then it says the 6 types of remedies are only those that occur in Shantideva's compendium of trainings. There are many others. So there are not only these 6 antidotes, there are many others. These are just the ones that Shantideva in the compendium of trainings wrote. So Shantideva, the author, translator's note of guide to the Bodhisattva's way of life, this is another of his texts.
That Debala Temba Chu, Chen Temba Yimbatal, Sanji Tang, Geshe Chenmo Naji, Chen Tuishin Zongwa Yimbeishir. Tangsuna Karchisa. Tasi Tangsuna? Debala Temba. Yagi Jabala Soba, Chugaji Deba Chuji. And Swaji Tang, Geshe Chenmo Naji, Chen Tuishin Zongwa Yimbeishir. Chen La Temba Yimbata. Debala Temba in Chen La Temba Yimbeishir. So there is a big debate that then takes place that you say, so if when one is engaging in dependence upon recitation, such as reciting the mantra of the 100-syllable mantra of Vajrasattva, is then he or she also engaging in dependence upon names? Is there a common locus between dependence upon names and dependence upon recitation? If it is dependence upon names, is it necessarily, if it is dependence upon recitation, is it also necessarily then dependence upon names? So this is something that we have to think about, because when we're reciting the 100-syllable mantra of Vajrasattva, while we're doing the other practices, we are reciting and retaining the names of Buddhas and the great conqueror's children. So the definition of dependence upon names means to hear and recite, and the recitation of and retain the names of. It could also be and to hear the recitation of, or recite. I'd like to look at the Tibetan. I think it's more recite, but I have to look. And retain the names of Buddha's great children. So we find, when we look at the definition, it also fits for what we're doing in number 3 for a portion of it. So we have to ask that question, and that's something that would happen in debate. Digsung. And yeke jabala suba chuga jin deba chu saje da jesi chemo na chen tuishi zong yimbe yeshir yimbe chabe yeshir tang suna masong peche reyo kenso ndabu duwa te a
Cha. The cha.
chaba ndabu duwa
Cha.
te tuba duwa tuba.
He says that we have a doubt, but we would think that maybe because when we're reciting these mantras, such as the 100-syllable mantra, we are hearing the recitation of and retaining the names of Buddhas and the Bodhisattvas, and the great conqueror's children. So we have to doubt it. But we'd say there probably are 3 permutations or 3 possibilities that if it is dependence upon recitation, that it is necessarily dependence upon names as well.
Oh, that ne
Kama Jujusun.
tanga so de nebal nebugun de jevita kaza nebugun de jevita je Naba Sanji without never going to without Taji, never going to without the Jodua.
Lessa.
What to say? Tamundo de Samala Temba, Niba Tuni Lameba, Somba, Devala Temba, Jeba Kuzula Temba, Naba Chubala Temba, Juba Channel Temba. What the never going to without Jodua Rendua. What does we have ever gene?
So we've gone through, when we're looking at the power of applying remedies, we've gone through, I'm sorry, when we look at the 4 opponent powers now, we've gone through first the section on the power of eradication, the great contrition for having done non-virtue, and then we've gone over the power of applying remedies. And we've gone over this quite a bit because this section is just so important because it allows us to purify our negativities or our non-virtues. It serves as a direct opponent to these negativities. So when we look at this dependence upon the profound sutras and interest in emptiness, dependence on recitation, and then dependence upon images and dependence upon worship and dependence upon names, we have to be very clear that we understand these things because of what they are able to do. So this is why we must understand this, and that's why it's so important. So important. Okay, so now if we want to go to questions, it's fine. Right now. So that'll conclude the teaching for the day. Now we have questions for a short period. We have about 10 minutes left, if people have them.
Thank you. Are any of these stronger than the other? Meaning, would you purify more negativity through a dependence on profound sutras than you would dependence on names?
Contriwa de Nepo Gundishupido, the drew ere. Then they drew the Kanga Chipa, the cheek Hwagdu, the Deepa Pechewa Gari Akshu.
That can't Tony Gomba the Nebayashu, Tony Gomba Izireta. In the Cheyamata, Susu Lule, Kari Chicheva in our day, Debatacho Izire. Do the Samula Temba de Ichichevi, don't know by Ina, Debatacho Izire. Then Tony Mabajene, Tony Gonshina, Tony Gonata, Debatano. Then the Kuzula Temba. And then Swaji Kuzu to what the Zuba in the Debatan, which is what that. Then Chubambuya, what to the Ishishibiana, Gutano,
Share a civil do.
Yeah.
So it is normally said that interest in emptiness would be the category that would have the most power in terms of purifying the greatest amount of negativity. But you have to look at your own individual mind and see what your level is, or what your aptitude is, because if you have a greater amount of faith and convictions in this dependence upon sutra, so if that realization, it's called faith of conviction. So if you have this faith of conviction in this dependence upon sutras, then this is what's best for you to use, and this is what becomes the most powerful opponent. If you have this a greater amount of affinity for interest in emptiness and a faith and conviction in it, then this becomes the most powerful. If you have the most faith and conviction in the dependence upon recitation, then this is the most powerful. And then it goes the same for dependence upon images, dependence upon worship, and dependence upon names. It's whatever among those six you have the closest, I don't want to use the word connection to, but it's the most realization in relation to is more, and what is that realization? The faith and conviction in it, this kind of incontrovertible belief, is what the faith and conviction kind of means. Is this belief that's solid and secure in it? Sabuldu, Troy, Abuldu.
Rinpoche, could you please tell us a little bit about who the 35 Buddhas were or are?
Sanjay, the Sunju Sunga, Su, the Sanjay, the Tongshag, the Sanjay Sunju Sunga, the Sure, Sanjay Su, Gadu Sanjay J.
That Damada user, the Kaji Hel Sanjay user, Kaji Tishul Sanjay, Damada user.
Ngama Sanjay. So really there are, Rinpoche is just saying there are various different Buddhas, these are beings that became Buddhas before. So previously became Buddhas and now they are Buddhas. So they're from various times and places. Yeah, various times and places. These 35 Buddhas. Stasha True, Jenny, you're right.
Yeah, okay.
It's actually from the lamp for the path to enlightenment.
Nishanchi Landung Chiwa.
Oh, yeah.
I believe it's verse 40, where it says, thus maintaining well the conditions mentioned in the collection of meditation stabilization chapter. Those conditions, I believe, from what I can do research, I think are here on page maybe 123.
Which stanza is it?
I believe it's 40. Let me just double check, I'm sorry.
Yeah, and then...
Thus maintaining well the conditions mentioned. Where, is that something that we could find in English? I thought I found it in the lamp, or in this book.
This is 50.
I'm sorry. Oh, on page 123.
Geshe Tenzin. Rinpoche, the this Sumju.
So, Jiju Maru.
The Jipju.
Jiju.
Okay.
Geshe Tenzin, Sulu, the Jiju.
That's good. Okay. The Tenzin. Jipju.
Jiju.
The Geshe Tenzin.
Jiju Redo, Jiju.
Then the Jen Gare.
Geshe Tenzin, Sulu, Le, Sombi Yuna. Lale, ne, Meba Kano Chitala, Inakala Javas, what the thing is, maybe never things in maybe. Things go things Geshe Lharampa in the Gumba you are, Kashi and then Sanjil in the Gumba you are, and the Kashi, you and Damadal in the Gumba. Things in Mabel and Jimmy Tachi to the Gusa Yomare, and the thing is going Kurun Dobares, Dobakario Baina, what the main of Guna Digres. The shit is too low, soon be la lene. Maybe Karonchi Tala in the class. Maybe Karonchi that's on do, and the thing is where maybe the Punking and Najuba Kunogi, Dobares, Karonchi la mene, and Sijit Gonjares in the glass of house.
Less so. Then Gela, Gewa.
Go out, that thing is going to go and Rota.
Then a con chua, the Becha, Yure, the Layu, the Tinso, Layu, Lay. Then the Becha de, the Chen Gare.
The shit is
The Tingenzi, the Chen.
Tingenzi said the low judge of that.
Becha me.
Sergeant Louis.
Less so.
What the Nolu de danger of that. Maybe Karochi Tala in the Glajavas.
Then the Kongi Triwa, the cheer Tenzin so le Sumpi Yen La.
Lalines.
Let's go. Then the Sumpi Yen La Garre.
Somebody and Lata what the things to Lule, and then things maybe you latte, and the Halamina Guna Jigate, and then Shilamina Guna Jigate, so is it. Maybe Karochi Tala in the Galajavas. How going to things go Gurun Deba. Deba Najagons, so yours.
Then the Tingenzi, the Lapja Garre, the Injike, the Sunju Sungo, the Lapja. The Yure, then the Lapja, the Jipju, the Tingenzi, the Layu, the Lapja Yure, Tingenzi Lapja Yure, the Lapja Gare.
Sulule, Sumbi Las. That largest Lana Tingenzi Mipa to Sundus Gugger Sumbatilla, largest Gogger. What the thing is, Gogina. And then maybe the me goes solo son yours. They do not caress and maybe Kano Chitala in the Galajavas. Do the letter son Yezerota. Maybe Kano Chitala, Nejuba, Sene Gonka Rada and Deba, and then maybe Deba Cariobaina, tell me, things go on Jigres.
Then the Yanla.
Some be Yala, what they Yezerota.
Okay.
What then on that maybe Kano Chil Mene. Then
Yanla agenda Yerbe.
Mommy is that Hagoyat and Raman. Maybe go to maybe Mobile men go to my maybe Chigo.
Okay. So here, this is speaking about the conditions. So this text mentions conditions for achieving the state of calm abiding, and one of those conditions that are presented is to focus on one object solely, to only focus on one object. Here it says a virtuous focal object. And Rinpoche said that the single-pointed concentration meditation is virtuous. So that's what Rinpoche just said in regards to that. This is a sutra, and this is a specific section in a sutra that talks about achieving single-pointed concentration. So when we place our mind, it should be on one subject only, and it shouldn't change, whether it's a deity. Some people use the Buddha. You are independent in regards to what you should meditate on. So the yogi, the meditator, is able to choose his or her own meditation topic. But once, and topic, when I say topic, I should say subject. So once one has chosen, or the yogi chooses a specific object to gain single-pointed concentration in relation to, then that object doesn't change. So whether or not this text is in English, I don't think Rinpoche would know.
I'm sorry, it was on page 139.
In the okay. So once we get into page 139,
Yes.
And where is it on here?
It says more of our teacher's chapter. Is that the same text?
I'm sorry, I'm not seeing it.
Page 139?
I'm on it. Bottom, top? Top. Bodhibhadras? But this is Bodhibhadra's collection, and the other one is a sutra. Is that what you're talking about? Moreover, Bodhibhadra's chapter on the collections of concentration? On page 139?
Yes.
Really?
The collection of concentration is a teacher's chapter in the collection of concentration.
I'm on page 139, and it says chapter on the collections of concentration is Bodhibhadra.
Mm-hmm.
That's what you have. And yours says Atisha?
It does.
Okay, then the NGK, the Lamrim Chenmo Junior. Let me see. Okay. Yeah, mine's different. Okay, so we'll find out right now. I've just got to find page 95 in the Tibetan. That's for Rinpoche. The Jutsun Xing Mare, NGK, Yo Mare. So Rinpoche is saying if you want to learn more about these the conditions and practices, you'll be able to find them in the section in the third volume. Rinpoche is giving advice right now. So if you want to, the meaning is in that text, in the text, in the back. Let me start this over. In the third volume of the Great Treatise on the Stage of the Path to Enlightenment, there's a section on calm abiding and special insight. All of the advices and practices are very clearly mentioned in there, so you can refer to that if you want to gain clarity. And then Rinpoche said our time has gone past, so we're going to end. So we still have to do prayers.
Okay.
Concluding mandala offering and dedication prayer. The fundamental ground is scented with incense and strewn with flowers, adorned with Meru, or contains the sun and the moon. I imagine this as a Buddha land and offer it. May all sentient beings enjoy this pure. I dedicate whatever virtues I have collected for the benefit of the teachings of all sentient beings, in particular the essential teachings of Venerable Losang Drapa to shine forever. Send forth this true mandala to you, precious Guru. I dedicate this virtue to emulate the knowledge of the hero Manjushri and likewise Samantabhadra as well. With whatever dedication is praised as supreme by all the conquerors who traverse the 3 times, I also dedicate all my roots of virtue for the sake of auspicious deeds. In that pure land, surrounded by the source of all benefit and happiness, all-powerful Abbot Tenzin Yatso, may stay until samsara is end. I pray for the long life of the precious Khensur Rinpoche, a holder of scriptural and realizational doctrines, a spiritual friend who trained extensively in the 5 great philosophical texts with exceptional wisdom and perseverance. Suji Rinpoche Kuti Shapi Tenrona, Lamrim Chenmo Kong the True.